Our immigration system, I sometimes describe as about as complicated as the tax code, but more malevolent. It's weird, it's archaic, it's hard to navigate. There are lots of different ways that people can get their status right, but sometimes it's kind of like the camel through the eye of the needle. And there's lots of ways that people can get their status wrong in ways that are pretty innocent. And so when someone goes to consult with an immigration lawyer, they hopefully get the rundown of kind of exactly which boxes they check for good and for bad. And oftentimes the result is that there's not really anywhere for them to go at this point. And that's why we need a change in the law, as a lot of people argue. What DACA does is clears away a lot of that and recognizes that most of these people are not in a normal immigration status, but recognizes that they're in that situation because they were brought to this country as young people. They have completed school, or they're in school, or they've served in the military, and they've largely kept out of any kind of significant criminal issues. And so again, the government is saying, we really don't think you'd be a priority for deportation anyway, and in fact, we recognize that the situation really isn't one of your own creation, and so we're going to give you the opportunity to live some semblance of a normal life. It was brought into effect on the Obama administration in 2012, and obviously stayed in effect through 2016. Things started getting a little bit weird in 2014, 2015. The Obama administration tried to expand DACA and also create a program for the parents of people who've been born here or permanent residents, and that program is known as DAPA. And that was when opponents to those kinds of measures scored one of their first victories. They basically got that expansion of DACA and that new program of DAPA enjoined or stopped by a federal judge in Texas. And so that was kind of the beginning of these DACA wars, as we might call them. There's a long kind of tortured posture that I could go into if it's helpful to you and your listeners or readers. But briefly stated, the current cases before the Supreme Court have to do with the Trump administration's decision in September of 2017 to announce the end of DACA. What the Trump administration did was announce this kind of suddenly and adopt a couple of different explanations, or rather they adopted one explanation at the time and then later on tried to argue a different justification. And that's what's before the court. And this gets into a really interesting but kind of mind-numbing and sometimes boring body of law called administrative law. And the question basically is whether the Trump administration jumped through the correct hoops when they wanted to repeal the DACA program. So here's how I see this. I would put the money on the Supreme Court probably saying that the Trump administration didn't jump through enough hoops, and that's both for legal and political reasons that I see that. Not that the court is explicitly political, but I think we're in an election year, we're close to an election, this is a highly hot button issue, and the status quo is pretty popular, at least with DACA. I mean, the status quo of it being in complete limbo is not popular, but the existence of the program and the continuation of the program for people who have it is popular. And so the Supreme Court, by siding with the Trump administration, would be plunging that limbo into, kind of picking people out of the frying pan and putting them into the fire. And so if you think that the court is responsive to the general political winds to some extent, then that weighs in favor of the plaintiffs, I guess, in this case, the people who are trying to stop this. Legally, I also think that the Trump administration got it wrong. I think as a matter of administrative law, that's pretty clear. And no one really disputes that the Trump administration could end DACA, but there are hoops that have to be jumped through. And an important point that some of the appellate courts have made is that political accountability has to be taken. One of the reasons we have administrative law the way that we do is we allow agencies to set rules and change rules, but then the buck stops with them. The buck stops with the agency if it adopts an unpopular rule or red tape that no one likes, then that agency kind of has to stand up for that. The administration has to explain why that was. What the Trump administration did in this case was they said, our hands are tied. This program's illegal. It never could have been put into place in the first place, and therefore we must repeal it because it was illegal to begin with, and there's nothing we can do about that. And that, of course, was a move they made because the program's very popular, including even among the Trump administration's political base. But then, of course, they later on have tried to argue that it's a matter of their discretion, and that gets into matters of judicial review and administrative law and kind of boring stuff like that.